Throughout history, kings, emperors, and sultans have been remembered as symbols of absolute power. They commanded armies, ruled over millions of people, and shaped the fate of entire civilizations. From the outside, they appeared fearless, decisive, and untouchable, yet behind palace walls, beneath crowns made of gold and jewels, many of these rulers lived with deep and persistent fears. Power did not erase fear. In many cases, it intensified it. The fear of betrayal was perhaps the most common and most destructive. A king could survive enemies at the border, but an enemy inside the palace was far more dangerous. Julius Caesar ruled Rome with unmatched authority, yet his greatest fear was not the barbarian armies beyond the empire. It was the Senate. He sensed the growing hostility among men who smiled in public and whispered in private. On the Ides of March, his fear became reality. The blades that ended his life were not held by foreigners, but by trusted allies. Centuries later, Ottoman sultans carried this same fear into their daily lives. The palace was a place of luxury, but also of constant suspicion. Many sultans slept in different rooms each night. Some refused to eat food prepared by unknown hands. Poison was a silent threat, invisible and impossible to detect until it was too late. Tasters were employed not for comfort, but for survival. Sultan Mehmed III is remembered for one of the darkest acts in Ottoman history, the execution of his 19 brothers. This was not an act of cruelty alone, but of fear. The fear that one day one of them would rise against him. The fear that blood ties meant nothing in the struggle for power. In his mind, survival demanded absolute control, even over his own family. Fear also lived in the minds of medieval European kings, especially the fear of rebellion. A crown could be taken as easily as it was placed. King Richard II of England ruled by divine right, yet he was constantly haunted by the idea that his nobles would turn against him. In the end, they did. He was imprisoned, abandoned, and quietly killed. His fear followed him to his final days. Some rulers feared the judgment of God more than the judgment of men. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V believed deeply that his soul would be punished for the bloodshed committed in his name. In his later years, he withdrew from political life and lived in isolation, surrounded by religious texts and rituals. The power he once commanded no longer brought him peace. Silence became his refuge. Russian Tsars carried a different kind of fear, the fear of chaos. Russia was vast, diverse, and difficult to control. Ivan the Terrible believed that without fear, the state would collapse. His paranoia grew over time. He saw enemies everywhere. He created a secret police force to hunt imagined traitors. In a moment of uncontrollable rage and fear, he killed his own son. That single act haunted him until his death. fear of assassination shaped the daily routines of rulers across continents. Napoleon Bonaparte, despite his military genius, feared being poisoned. He avoided certain foods and trusted very few people. Even on the battlefield, his fear was not of death in combat, but of a sudden, unseen attack from within his own ranks. Chinese emperors feared not only rebellion, but history itself. In Chinese tradition, rulers believed they would be judged by future generations. A bad legacy was a form of eternal punishment. Emperor Qin Shi Huang, obsessed with immortality, feared death more than anything else. He consumed mercury-based elixirs to live forever, unaware that they were slowly killing him. His fear of death became the cause of it. Some fears were deeply personal and rarely spoken aloud. King Louis XVI of France feared public humiliation more than war. He struggled with indecision and self-doubt. As the French Revolution grew, his fear paralyzed him. Each delay, each hesitation, brought the revolution closer. When he was finally executed, witnesses described a man who seemed resigned, as if his greatest fear had already been fulfilled long before the blade fell. Even the most successful rulers were haunted by the fear of being forgotten. Alexander the Great feared a life without glory. His relentless conquests were driven not only by ambition, but by the fear that history would move on without remembering his name. He died young, exhausted, far from home, leaving behind an empire that collapsed almost immediately. Yet his name survived. Just as he hoped, in Japan, shoguns lived under the constant fear of dishonor. A single failure could erase generations of prestige. This fear shaped a culture where suicide was seen as preferable to shame. Power was temporary, but honor was eternal. As time passed, technology changed, borders shifted, and empires rose and fell, but fear remained constant. Modern leaders still fear betrayal, public anger, and loss of control. The difference is only in the tools, not the emotions. The greatest irony of power is this: the higher one rises, the more there is to lose. Kings feared the night because it gave their thoughts room to speak in silence. Without crowds or ceremonies, fear became louder. These rulers were not monsters or gods. They were human beings, burdened by responsibility, haunted by uncertainty, and trapped by their own authority. Their fears shaped decisions that changed history, sometimes more than their courage ever did. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: the crown never removed fear, it only hid it behind gold.